Hello FlossTube and welcome back to my channel. I am Ros Clark. This is Ros Clark Craft here on YouTube. You can also find me as Ros Clark Craft on Instagram, Etsy and Facebook. Now, this is not a normal FlossTube video. I'm here to tell you about a very exciting project that I'm very excited about. I hope you are going to be very excited about too. That is the launch of my Stitchquilt Stitchalong. Stitchquilt Stitchalong. Very excited about this. Slightly obsessed. Before I start, I've got a whole list of things I need to tell you. Before I start, I want to give 2 acknowledgements to people who have inspired me unwittingly for this project, and it would just be wrong of me to pretend that this all came out of my own head unaided. So the first person is Kathy Haberman of Hands-On Design. I'm just looking to see, I haven't got it handy. Anyway, a number of years ago, I stitched one of her projects that was in a quilting and patchwork magazine. It was the lovely Deborah of Kensington Creates, who I had the pleasure of meeting recently. It was so fun. We had such a lovely time. She mentioned it and I happened to have free access to the magazine and thought it was great. It was a flamingo design and you stitched 6 little cross stitches and made them into little hexagons and made them together. So this is another one in that same series. This one I just bought obviously as a standalone cross stitch chart. I imagine you can get the flamingo one in this format as well now. I don't know, I haven't checked. There may be others in this series as well. But I loved this idea of putting cross stitch on hexagons for paper piecing patchwork. A lot of people call this English paper piecing to distinguish it from foundation paper piecing. Foundation paper piecing is an entirely different method where you use machines and yeah, very funny shapes and whatever. I grew up just calling this paper piecing. Maybe that's because I'm English, I don't know. So anyway, when I talk about paper piecing, this is what I mean. And you may know that as English paper piecing. But I was just like, that's a really interesting idea. Using cross stitch to make really special little, obviously hexagons, and in fact mine are hexagons as well, but you could do it on any kind of patchwork shape. So that was where that idea came from, and I want to acknowledge her. I haven't yet stitched this one, but I'm going to quite soon. I think I've got a bigger project I'm working on of stitch themed charts. So I think probably for that I'm going to do this bigger hexagon at the top, but at some point I would like to do the little hexagon ring as well. So that's her. And then the other lady I wanted to credit is called Emma Jones. She is a British YouTuber and stitcher. She stitches predominantly paper piecing. She also does some embroidery and various other things as well, but hand sewing is what she really loves, and quilting, patchwork, those kind of things. She has a shop where she sells some of the supplies, but also her own patterns. But a beautiful YouTube channel, one of those that, you know, you listen to it and you could fall asleep and you can feel your blood pressure lowering. And so I don't do a lot of patchwork and quilting these days. I've got some long-term projects that I don't do a lot on. But I still really love watching her, and she loves to work with beautiful fabrics, lots of Liberty fabrics, lots of beautiful colours, not necessarily my colours, but just the whole thing is beautiful. So if you don't watch her channel, Emma Jones at Vintage Sewing Box, again, that will be linked below. And I'm also going to link to a number of tutorials in a little playlist that I've created from her channel that will help you with this particular project. And the thing that I have to credit her with is the inspiration from her, she calls it, it's a lovely project, it's called the Happy Memories Quilt. And they're what she calls quilt-as-you-go hexagons. I don't know if the quilt-as-you-go idea is unique to her, I don't suppose it is, but I had not seen it before, and I'd certainly not seen it before with hexagons. And it just, the two things, the stitched hexagons and the quilt-as-you-go hexagons merged, because I'd had the idea ever since I'd seen the first hands-on design one that I did of designing something in that format, and I just found it really hard, and maybe I was working on too small a scale. I found it hard to do designs that were satisfying to stitch that were small enough to fit on the hexagons, and obviously you know, Kathy had this really clever idea of doing it almost like in a ring or using a bigger hexagon here. But I was so like, do people really want to do that? And then stitch them together and then back them and quilt. And then the quilt-as-you-go ones came along and I'm like, ah. So this is an example of a quilt-as-you-go hexagon. You can see I've stitched the front and then I've got a piece of fabric on the back. And essentially you just fold that over onto the front, hand stitch around the inside. The whole thing is fully finished, raw edges enclosed, jobs are good. And it is a modular system. So you can just do one or you can do 500. But either way, I'm not doing 500. Each one is sort of fully finished in its own right, but can be joined together with others to make different things. And these are easy. I reckon it takes me doing the cross stitching 2-3 hours. There's slightly different amount of stitchings on each of them, but you know, an evening's worth of stitching and then an extra 20 minutes to make it into the fully finished hexagon. So you can do them as you go along. Each one is a fully finished object in its own right. You know, there are no raw edges. There's nothing else you need to do to it unless you want to. So that really appealed to me. And as you can see, these hexagons are certainly bigger than the ones that I was using when I was trying to do the separate things. These are what we call a 2-inch hexagon, which is to say this length along the edge is 2 inches. So that's 2 inches, 2 inches, and so on. So the whole thing is 4 inches in one direction and about 3 3/4 in the other direction. So you've got a fair amount to do a nice little design on there. And as you can see, let me show you the ones that I've got here. I've got D for dandelion, C is for colours, and A is for apple. I'm doing an alphabet series. So this is what I'm calling in my head my Stitchquilt Series 1. Yeah, I'm slightly obsessed with them at the moment. So there is going to be a whole alphabet. Who knows whether there will be a Series 2, something non-alphabetic. There may be, because they are really, really fun and small and manageable. And yeah, now that I've got a sort of template worked out for where my design is going to fit, because obviously I don't want to do a square chart. I want to do something that's using the shape as best I can. So I've worked out how big that needs to be for different sizes of count of fabric and so on. So it's all set to go. So that's what we're doing. What is it? So there will be a weekly chart. That's why I need the notes, get a bit carried away. Weekly chart. So we're going to start with A is for apple on the 1st of February. There's going to be one chart come out every Sunday. You'll be able to download these for free from a link in my Instagram bio or in the Ros Clark Craft Facebook group. Weekly chart to stitch. You'll make them into hexagons, lots of ways of finishing them. There will be, not in this video, but there will be other videos showing you how you can make them into different kinds of things. They will be free during the course of the stitch along, but at the end of the stitch along, I will take down the charts, repackage them, and they will be available for purchase in my Etsy shop. So if you want to make sure of getting them, download them while the stitch along is still on. That's what we're doing. What kind of things can you make from this? Well, I haven't yet got examples of all of these, but the kinds of things you can make from this, if you just stitch one and you're like, you know, that was nice, but I've had enough now, you could make that into an ornament. I mean, you could literally make it into an ornament as it is, but you could put, and I will show you how you do this, something to give that a bit more stiffness to it, some cardboard, or I quite like to use plastic canvas for that sort of thing, just to give it a little bit more rigidity. And then obviously a hanging hook thing, whatever you call that, on the back, hanger from the top, so you could make that into a little hanging ornament. The other thing you could do with just one, I'm not sure I would do this, but you could make it into a little kind of coaster. If you're going to do that, I would put inside it the kind of thermal fleece, so then it actually becomes heat proof. But I would be nervous about having someone put a mug on top of my stitching. So I might not do that. You can get those kind of things, can't you, where you have like perspex on top, but then you don't get to enjoy the stitching. So I'm not going to make a coaster, but you could. It'd be the right sort of size for that. You could make a needle case. So for that, you would need one stitched one and one using just some plain fabric. So you'd only need to stitch one, and then you would sew them together and open up, and this would be your needle book. I'll do a tutorial for that, but you could do that with just one. You can make a really nice pillow just with one hexagon stitched, and then you'd have some plain hexagons. I think I've got one, yeah. So like this, or I've done it just with plain fabric and so there's no cross stitching. So this in total takes about 15 minutes to make, and you would use a number of those, and I will show you how you make that into a really lovely size and shape of small pillow, sort of dough bowl sized pillow. So that would be if you only wanted to stitch one, and then you'll know, I've had enough of this now. If you're willing to do a few more, I've got a really nice idea for how you could use that to make a bigger cushion cover. I say make, my idea is you buy a cushion cover, but then we just applique already fully finished hexagons on the front in a sort of classic hexagon flower arrangement. I think that'd be super easy. All of this so far is only requiring hand sewing. Almost all of these projects are suitable for people who are scared of their sewing machine or don't have a sewing machine. The next one, however, I would use a sewing machine for a little bit of this. So I'm going to show you how you can make into a small pouch, kind of thing you would keep notions in, or sort of pencil case kind of size. If you're going to put a zip in that, I would machine sew the zip. You don't absolutely have to, but it is better if you can machine sew the zip. There are other ways you could finish that depending what you might use it for, but I probably would machine sew that. The other thing I think would be super cute to make from these would be a garland. So for a nursery or for a children's bedroom, you could pick the ones that spell out their name, or you could do the whole alphabet and just sew them into a garland, like bunting, hexagon shaped bunting, I think would be absolutely adorable. And like if you just did their name, you only have to do, you know, a handful of letters. I mean, it depends how long your child that you're thinking of their name is, but you know, you might only have to do 4 or 5 of these. You know, they're called rods, you only have to do 3. And then, yeah, you could intersperse them if you wanted with some extra plain fabric ones, if you wanted it a bit longer. You could do what you want. I mean, with all of this, you could do one. These are suggestions. I'm not the kind of designer who is very controlling about what other people do with their designs. You do you. And, you know, I would love to see people take these, stitch them in their own colours, stitch them with their own fabrics, stitch them in different sizes. I would love to see people come up with really amazing finishing ideas, particularly for these. So these are just some of the ones I've thought of. So what have we just had? Name banner. Larger things you could do if you want to stitch more of these. Project bag. I am going to show you how you make a project bag from these. And again, most of it will be hand stitching, but if you want to put a zip in, I would recommend a sewing machine for the zip. A larger cushion cover, one where instead of just a bit of the design, the whole thing is made out of the hexagons. You can do that entirely hand sewn if you want. And obviously, if you want to stitch hundreds of these, you can make a quilt. I am not going to make a quilt, but you could. I mean, and if anyone does, I would love to see it. In theory, one could make a quilt. So various ideas, and I'm sure there are more, and I may think of more as we go through, and if I do, I will show you what they are and how you do them. And I'm sure there are other ideas as well on Emma's channel, for example, of different ways you can use hexagons to make things. So they're really flexible, and particularly if you don't want to do lots of stitching, just doing exactly the same thing but with a piece of pretty fabric, you really can make quite a lot quite quickly. And yeah, fully finished, all done. So that's what we're doing. That's what we might end up with. What are you going to need? So I am putting together an information sheet which will have all of this on that you can download. Again, I think from my Instagram bio or my Facebook feed. It's just not very easy to put download link. I don't really want to put it here in the description. If you can't find it in one of those places, leave me a comment and I will find a way of getting that download link to you. What are you going to need? Well, the other thing that's great about this project is it's really good for scraps. So for these, this size of hexagon, you need a 5-inch square piece of linen or Aida to stitch on. The charting Works best, I think, for a 36 count or 18 count fabric, but it will work. This one is stitched on a 32 count, and you can see it works. It's fine. So if you want to use 32 or 16 count, you'll be fine. If you want to use 14 or 28, you will need a bigger hexagon template, and you're on your own with the maths. If you want to use higher count fabric, 36, 40, 18 or 20, I think that's on a 36. I think it looks great. I've got one somewhere that's on a 40 count, which I now can't find, but also looks fine. So I think if you were to do it on 46 or, 56 count or whatever, you probably would do that on a smaller hexagon, or you'd end up just with really quite big borders, but they will fit. But yeah, I would say my ideal would be 36 or 18, but there's quite a lot of flexibility. 32, 36, 40, 16, 18, 20 will all work just fine. So I have been deliberately doing mine, as you can see, on different stitching fabrics, different sizes and also different colours, just so that it will have, I don't know quite how these are going to end up in project together, but it's going to have a really patchworky feel to it. And I think that's lovely. I think that will work really nicely. But you don't have to. Obviously, you could say, well, I've got a huge piece of, 36 counts Vigar in whatever. I'm just going to do them all on that. Great. But because they only need a 5-inch square, they're great for doing on leftover awkward size scraps of fabric. On the flip side of that, it means you never have a reason to throw away a piece of fabric ever again. I apologise. Or at least not one that's 5 inches square or bigger. But they do fit on that, and they work really well on that. And to go along with that, you will need a 5-inch square of backing fabric. Oh, here we go. This is the one. I think that's on 40 count, but I haven't made it up. But if I put that behind, I wonder if you can, no, you can't see at all. Okay, let me just compare that with, I think this is 32 count, and I think that's 40 count. So you can see the stitching is quite a lot smaller, but it will be fine on the same size hexagon. Okay, backing fabric, right. 5-inch square quilting fabric. I do think quilting cotton is going to be the way to go. Anything heavier than that is going to be really bulky and awkward and not lie very nicely when you do the finishing. And anything lighter than that, I mean, if you've got lots of lovely Liberty Tana lawn and you want to use that, knock yourself out. But I wouldn't want to use anything that's too slippery, certainly nothing with any stretch in it. Just quilting cotton is the best thing. And you can buy packs of 5-inch squares of quilting cotton. They are charm packs, and you get them in all kinds of ranges, and they just come, and then you've got lots and lots of options of fabrics that look really pretty together. So that's one option. If you don't have loads of quilting fabric at home, backing fabric, charm packs would be a great way of building up some stash for this project. But you don't have to use charm packs. I have also been using, I've got quite a lot of cuts of, this is a sort of chambray style quilting cotton, and all of these that I've already made up, I've used that to give a solid colour, the outline. And I think that's what I'm going to do with mine. I'm going to do solid, slightly solid, this sort of chambray effect, quite slightly muted sort of solid for the outline, and then use the pretty patterned fabrics like these to make non-stitched hexagons. So yeah, that's not that pattern, but you can see that sort of thing. So that's what I'm using, but you can do whatever you want. You absolutely can use patterned fabrics to make the border. And if you go and look at Emma's videos, she does that and they look absolutely adorable. You can use, I think if you've got fabrics that have got really big pattern or, kind of really big images, you could do some lovely fussy cutting and arrange that right on the center of your hexagon. And those would be beautiful to include. But also you can do some, I haven't made these up yet, but I've cut some just out of quite simple fabrics. These are going to be to make up a little pillow, and I want the dandelion one to be the center of this. And so then I've cut, which I obviously now can't find, you know, but a number of these sort of plainer stripes and dotted, and I think I've got a checked one that I'm going to use as well, that will be the sort of background, if you like, to that. I am using, and I will put links to where I bought these, but they are available pretty much anywhere, Tilda fabrics, Tilda chambray. These are Tilda Creating Memories in the spring colourway. And I've also got coming from her new line, the Songbird range, a pack of charm squares that should be here in the next week or so. And I think they will have some really lovely bigger images. These are all quite low volume backgroundy kind of fabrics. So that's what I'm using, but you absolutely, again, don't feel like you've got to go and buy stuff for this. If you've got a 5-inch square scrap of fabric, you can use it for one of these. And you only need one because we're doing the backing and the binding all in one from the same piece of fabric. So you need your 5-inch square stitching fabric and your 5-inch square backing and binding fabric. That's it. It's so good. It's so good. Can you tell I'm quite obsessed with these? So fabric, backing fabric, obviously floss. I will put, I've got a sort of floss ring here, which actually I have added a couple of others too. And I'm sort of working with this palette. So I will put a list of what I've got. These are all DMC. I've also been using a couple of anchor threads as well, but I'll put some DMC equivalent. But again, do not go and buy floss for this project. We're only stitching, each of these has got like maybe 300 stitches in. You do not need lots of floss. You have got floss in your stash that you can already use, I'm confident. So go and have a look. What have you got in sort of partial skeins? Or what have you got in skeins that are, you know, really nice and variegated, but you've no idea how to use them? They would be lovely. I think if you did the lettering in a variegated floss, that could be lovely. Yeah, so don't go and spend money on this project. I mean, unless you absolutely have to. But I bet you've got stitching fabric. I bet you've got some backing fabric. I bet you've got floss that you could make one of these tonight without worrying about it. So you will need floss and obviously whatever else you use for stitching, hoops and scissors and whatever. Now you're going to need something to put inside your hexagon, and I'm going to show you, before we get there, actually, I'm going to show you the bag that I'm keeping all of this in. Well, the 2 bags, in fact. So this is what I'm keeping all my stitching in. This is a bag made from by a company that no longer is in existence, but I just love it for this project because I'm pretty sure all of this is Tilda fabric from an older line. So I'm using that, and that's what I'm keeping my stitching in. And then I'm using this, which is from the lovely Sarah at Penelope's Pocket. It's one of her Cantha bags, and I absolutely love it. And that is perfect actually for keeping in all my quilting fabric and these, which I am now going to show you. So this is what I am using to put inside my hexagons. Ashmead Designs pre-cut hexiform hexagons, side length 2 inches. And they look like this. So they are indeed pre-cut hexagons, but unlike traditional paper piecing where you literally put paper inside your hexagons and then stitch around them and then it's all sewn together and then you take the papers out, this is designed to be left in your quilt. So it's like a wadding, but it's very thin and very flexible. When we come to the example, for example, for the project bag, I'm not going to use, well, I might use this, but I will also use like a soft and stable or something else as well. It'll be too thin and floppy for that. But for making into a pillow or a little bag or a little needle case, perfect. For an ornament, like I say, I would probably put in something else to stiffen it. But what I love about it is it's pre-cut into my hexagon shape. So I use this as my template. I do my stitching on my square of fabric. Let me show you the one that I've got here. So I do my stitching on a square like this. Then I get my hexiform I put that on the back, making sure it's, you know, my stitching is in the middle of it, pin it on, and then cut. Yeah, that won't be like that. It needs to be on the grain. The straight edge of the hexagon goes along the grain of the fabric, so that's a good way of lining it up. So then I do that, I cut that out, and then I've got my hexagon of my stitching. Then what I'll do is I'll use this again as my template, and I'll cut out a hexagon from my quilting fabric 1 inch bigger all the way around. Yeah, if you're doing 32 count, you probably can't quite get away with 1 inch. You probably need a 1/2 inch bigger all the way around. I will talk about this in another video, but also Emma talks about this much better than me in one of her videos linked below. So you would do that, cut that out, and then you're stitching around this hexagon, so that establishes your shape. If you're just making one, you don't have to worry about being too precise. If you're going to stitch any of these together, you do want them to be pretty accurately hexagon shaped. So if you get the pre-cut hexagons, you do not have to worry about that. I really recommend these. I can't remember how much they were. It wasn't super crazy expensive, but it's also not super cheap. I bought 60. Like I said, I can't remember how much they were. I will link it below. I don't know if you can get them not in the UK. Yeah, I don't know. It also tells us here, hexiform is washable at 40 degrees. So if you wanted to wash it, also fine. If you don't have this, you don't want to invest in this, you think you might only ever make one and you don't want to buy 60, you can use ordinary quilt wadding. I would definitely look for low loft quilt wadding, like a cotton or a bamboo. You don't want the polyester kind that's 1 inch thick. I think that will give a very funny... My dog is just sniffing around beside me. I think that wouldn't... Well, I'm not sure I would like the look. You could certainly try it. But I would look for a low loft quilt batting that you can use for that. You could also use just a piece of felt or boiled wool if you've got an old blanket, something like that. I guess you want to just be careful, depending on the fabric that you're using. If you're using something as the kind of wadding that's not just white or ivory or whatever, you might want to iron some interfacing on the back of your stitching first so that that doesn't show through. But that would be fine. Yeah, that would be fine. And again, actually, if you wanted to stiffen your hexagons for a particular project, one way to do that would be to use some stiff iron-on interfacing on your stitching fabric before you cut it up. You don't have to worry about anything fraying, you don't have to finish any of the edges, it all gets covered up. So that's hexiform, but like I say, other alternatives are absolutely possible. If you're using something that is not pre-cut, you will need a hexagon template. And on the information sheet, I will put a 2 inch hexagon template. Yeah, I'm just like, sorry, there is a hexagon on here, but I'm not going to use that one. I will put a 2 inch hexagon template on there. If you've got an acrylic template, you know, if you're a patchworker, use that. If you've got paper 2 inch templates, you could use that to sort of draw round onto your wadding, but do try and be as precise as you can when you're doing that. You'll need some fabric scissors, you'll need a ruler to kind of measure the extra inch round. You'll need ordinary sewing needle and thread. I think other than the hexiform or the hexagon template, you probably already have this stuff in stash. At least enough to make the first one and see how you get on with it. So it's exciting, isn't it? You could start now. I think by the time this video is out, I think the first chart will be available. So I'm really, really excited about this whole project. You may be able to tell. I'm just love, there's something so satisfying about doing the stitching, doing the finishing. It's all done in a couple of hours. What's in my alphabet? I mean, subject to change, all kinds of fun things. It will all be suitable that it could go in a child's room. So, you know, there's nothing kind of crazy out there, but it won't be just the ordinary things. The one that's kind of slightly unusual so far is colours, but you know, I'm still me, so of course I was going to do C is for colour. Is that focusing? Yeah, C is for colour. Some of you may recognise the colour wheel here. Yeah, it's not a proper spectrum colour wheel because I just wanted to use the ones that were in the palette that I already had. But you absolutely could customise that to any colour scheme you wanted. They're just fun. They're just fun to stitch. So there we go. If you're interested in doing it, like I say, you can download the first chart, A is for Apple, on my Instagram or on my Facebook group. If you're posting pictures, please use the hashtag Stitchquilt. Please tag me on Instagram because otherwise I might not see them anyway. Do join the Facebook group if you'd like to and share your pictures there, and we can chat about how people are getting on and what you might be doing to stitch them up. And then I will be back, I hope next weekend, I will be back with the first little tutorial. I will show you how I put one of these together, but I really recommend you check Emma's video out first. But what I'm also then going to show you is how I would make 2 of these into a little needle case. One stitched one with just fabric, how you would stitch that together and put a little needle case inside. So that's my plan. Is it won't be a tutorial every week, but as we go along and as we build up more, we'll get to some of the bigger projects that you could make. But we're going to start off with some of the smaller ones so that even if you've just got one stitched, you can make something. It's so exciting. So are you excited? If you're excited, tell me in the comments. If you're not excited, just click away. You don't need to tell me that. Yeah, looking forward to stitching along with you this year.